excited about today's talk and just setting up. Okay, so hello, Soul Tribe. I'm KamalaDevi, and today's exploration is about jealousy. It's probably the question that I get asked about the most as a sex and relationship healer, teacher, speaker. Whenever I'm doing a media interview, it's like, don't you ever get jealous? And I'd be a very rich being if I got paid every time I got asked that question. And for fun, because obviously I could do a whole week-long exploration about the deep teacher that jealousy is. But I thought it'd be fun today to highlight some of the myths and misconceptions that people have about it so that I could, just open the conversation. And so, the first piece is that after 20 years of open relating, multiple relationships, it's something that is, there's a fluency that you get with jealousy. Like jealousy is a natural, healthy human reaction, and it's a nervous system reaction, and it's something that is, it's just an alarm system that's going off that's saying something needs to be tended to. And so I won't get into, all the physiological and, trauma-informed responses that I could, because I do feel like that's a worthwhile exploration. But I will say this at the beginning. I want to just address that jealousy is like medicine. It's like a lot like a plant medicine where it's a deep teacher, but it also, if taken too much, can be a poison. Like you can get poisoned from it. It can hijack your thinking and your well-being, and we can make ourselves sick with it. So it's really valuable to look at, like, something can be medicinal and, stretch us to grow and resequence and upgrade and evolve, or it can also break us down and really bring us to our knees. So I've got 5 myths that I want to talk about. So I wrote them down before this session, and I want to invite and encourage your participation. So I am checking to see if I can see the comments. Okay, great. Welcome, Trinity, first-time viewer. And, Elvira and Justine, it's great to see you. I'm going to go ahead and start. Myth number 1. Ready? Oh, and you've heard this one before, I'm sure. Jealousy is a sign of love. So if you're not jealous, it's because you don't really care about your partner or the person, that's making you jealous. And this myth is so prevalent in our culture. Like it's in the monogamous airwaves, like in love songs. It's this idea of like it's a passionate rage that comes as a side effect of loving someone. And it's a real dangerous belief, because when we equate love and jealousy as like, oh, those are two things that, in order to show your love, you have to be jealous or possessive, or, demonstrate your displeasure with somebody else getting pleasure somewhere else. Like we're in this dramatic trap, this dramatic loop of, like, we see it on, Hollywood, and we think, oh, isn't that passionate and romantic? And it's like, actually, it makes for good drama on TV, but not a very peaceful, which we can, decouple love and jealousy. Now, I'm not saying those two don't, like interplay. They don't have a relationship, but it is important that, like, jealousy doesn't mean like that. If you're jealous for someone, it doesn't mean that that's love. And if you don't have jealousy, like myself with my husband, who I'm really celebratory when he's with a lot of his lovers, not all of them, but a lot of them, I'm like, I don't have any jealousy. I'm so grateful. And And the truth is, I do have jealousy with others, but the point is, people can look at that and think, oh, my partner, if I'm not feeling jealousy. And somehow that whole like, let's compare our loves is really also unhealthy. Like the judgment that we have on how other people are doing love can seep into jealousy's a meter of how much you love someone is pretty sick. And we see that in TV. So it doesn't mean if you're not jealous, it doesn't mean you don't care about them. There's a lot of people who actually don't experience jealousy, or who have a lot of security in themselves, in their partner, or they have security in the relationship itself. And there's no cause for jealousy, even though somebody from the outside might have their judgments. It's very unique. Jealousy equals love, or is a sign of it. And we're going to go to the opposite polarity with this next myth. Okay, so I wrote down, if it's real love, then you wouldn't. People are like, because real love is unconditional and jealousy comes from the ego. This is such a prevalent belief in spiritual communities as well. There's this idea that like, if you're spiritual enlightened, you don't experience jealousy. And it's bullshit. It's an unattainable ideal for a lot of people. And besides, I know so many people who are very spiritually evolved, teachers, healers, who actually still, have insecurities come up, or the fear of loss, or jealousy is such a complex thing. So like, we won't get into it, but there is a, deep, fear of abandonment, or maybe for some people it's loneliness or fairness, or there's all kinds of jealousy that have nothing to do with your spiritual evolution. It can just be like circumstantial, or maybe your resources are low and you're having human feelings. That doesn't mean you're not enlightened or evolved. So I'm going to share number 3. If I'm jealous because of something my partner did, therefore it's their fault. And if they really loved me, they wouldn't do that thing. And so I'm really loving this kind of voice, right? Which is very typical, immature, like my partner almost psychically should know how I'm feeling and should adjust all of their behavior in order to tailor to my feelings. Or, somebody else, it doesn't matter if they're my partner or not, like they're responsible for my feelings. And that's really immature. It's the definition of immaturity, is like not being responsible for our own emotions. And this idea of like, okay, I'm feeling jealous because my partner did something wrong, already implies, that it's based on some external circumstance and that I don't have control or volition about my own feelings, as opposed to be like, wow, I'm having feelings. Let me tune in and notice what's happening. And in fact, I'll go over, after I get through these 5 myths, I'll go over some of like what to do when you are feeling jealous. But the one thing to not do is blame somebody else and, immediately change their behavior. It may be after a whole process of deeper inquiry that that partner or person changes their behavior, but it, and that may be what's in the highest good of the whole ecosystem, but it also may be that that's a codependent response to some reaction that needed to come up for you to heal. So it also may be, and it's okay to make those requests of people, as long as you're coming from your center and you're clearing and you're responsibly making requests and not demanding that of your partner. All right, so I just thought it was fun to point out that there's this idea that it's somebody else's fault and I'm jealous because of what they did, and that's totally, and they should control their behavior. That's totally different than the opposite, which is number 4. We can't control our jealousy. Like even murderers have the excuse of temporary insanity, because they killed their spouse in a jealous rage, and then in a court of law were like given a pass. Like, that's a pretty extreme example, but the idea here is to point out how embedded in our culture it is that, like, we'll get so jealous that we'll act irrationally, and that there's nothing we can do to even control it. So if I'm jealous, I'm like a wrecking ball, I'm a monster, I'm, and don't blame me. It's like the Hulk comes out. So in one sense, it's like, we need to control out there, and then I have no control in here. And it's a all each of these five myths have some certain partial truths to them, like a kernel of truth to every stereotype, right? But it does feel out of control. However, that does not mean that we can't, slow down, take inventory, call life support, get some support elsewhere. There's a lot of things that we can do so that we're not, we may not be able to control how we feel, but we definitely can always control how we act. Our behavior is part of what it means to be adult and responsible. Okay, so the final one, just for fun, is number 5. If you want to transcend jealousy, just ignore it. So if you don't feed it with any energy, it's just going to go away. So sometimes I actually wish that were we're feeling something and we just ignore it. It's almost like pushing it into the shadows, pushing it into the basement. And it happens, for example, with mushrooms. If you push them into the they just pop up and grow really strong and healthy. And same with jealousy. Like, it will, if you push it away, it'll persist, because what we resist does powerfully and painfully sometimes. So that acknowledgement will somehow come back and sabotage you or your relationship in the least desirable way. And it's not always desirable to say in the moment, like, I'm feeling vulnerable, really having some, jealousy is arising, and I need to, like, check in and see what that's about. It's really hard to say that when, especially if our partners or other people look like they're having so much fun, and the more evolved thing to do would be to be happy or compulsive for them. And instead we have to say, wait, I need to slow down. I need to feel my feelings. And yet that's more responsible. That time to slow down and be vulnerable is, in the long run, going to be the healthiest course of action, as opposed to being in denial, and then later you find yourself, like, throwing a fit and a tantrum, and you don't even know where that came from, because it's been the monster in the basement that's been, like, trying to get out at its first opportunity. So that's part of what maturity does, is it slows down. It feels. And there is this beautiful guideline of, like, we have to feel it to heal it. I love that bumper sticker, spiritual bumper sticker, because it points to the body has an intelligence to it that we want to listen to. So, as I promised, I will share with you a little bit about how, like, what it is that I do when I'm jealous, because I've got, a fair amount of experience with it. And it looks a lot of different ways. I want to say that, like, jealousy is this umbrella, and it's a whole, or basket even, full of different emotions and needs, and, like, it can be a whole jumbled mess. So I'm like, oof, I feel something. And then it's like, okay, what do I need? Like, I need to create a container, usually, to untangle it. And that isn't hijacking my partners and being like, you need to listen to me now, and this is what I'm feeling. It's more like, hey, I'm having feelings. And what's a space in which, what's a good time in which I can feel into this? and it may be with my partners, it may be with a therapist, maybe with a brother or sister, but the idea is I need a non-judgmental space to actually notice, okay, what is the story I'm telling myself? And what is the story? Is the story a pattern? What does it remind me of? When's the first time I remember feeling this way? And so there's this like story that we're usually running, and underneath that, and this is basic NVC, right? Where we get into, here's my feelings. I don't spend a whole lot of time because the feelings can kind of consume you. So I like go, okay, let me just kind of sort through the feelings, but I want to be responsible with them. I don't want to like pour fuel on the flames. I mostly want to say, let me down regulate, slow down. And it's not denying the feelings, it's acknowledging them and welcoming them and understanding them and saying, why am I feeling this way? And not that I'm right or wrong or I should or shouldn't be, like not judging the feelings at all. Just, where's this feeling coming from? And that's where I often get the gold, which is there's a value here or need, like I value our precious relationship, and it's so, I want to protect it. Maybe it's a fear of loss. And it's often specific to what is it that you're doing with that other person, and it's something that I want to do too. I have this quote, it's really fun, in my polyamory pearls book. So this is a invaluable wisdom on open relationships, jealousy, group sex, and other invaluable spiritual pursuits. Yes. This book has a lot of like tongue-in-cheek jokes and play, but one of the wisdom in here is that it's really hard to be happy for someone else. Like if they're having a big feast and you're starving, like it's super almost impossible to be like, I'm happy to see you eat when I'm hungry. Like my animal nature, and you can watch it with animals if you're hungry, like, but also in nature, if there's an abundance of food, like if all the apricots are ripe and you like eat and your belly's full and you're like, I'm good, I don't need any more. Do you want some apricots? Like you see somebody else enjoying it and you're happy for them. And that's also the truth in many areas of our love life, which is like when we're getting lots of needs met and lots of specific ingredients, we're happy to see and share that with others. But if we're hungry, it's hard to be happy for others. So the practice is always looking for, where's the hunger? What am I yearning for? What am I desiring? And then not shaming the desire. Just being like, oh, what a beautiful desire. What a precious longing. And how can I like honor that even if it's not being fulfilled in this moment? How can I either go without it, or how can I seek to fill it in some other way? But let me be responsible about it and not tell my other lovers, you shouldn't have any apricots because I can't have any. Be like, okay, maybe it's time for them to feast and my time will come another time. Like there's different, of course, strategies. And none of this is about strategy. This is all about the awareness, the insight, the gold that we get from learning about ourselves in the practice of feeling these feelings. And the biggest gold I'll say, and I'm going to wrap this up and then see if there's any questions. In my 20 years of like really surrendering, almost like a submissive to the dominating bitch that jealousy can be, the biggest lesson I've gotten is how to slow down say slow down as my alarms are going off, like, but really feel gently, come back into love, like feel that all is well. And jealousy has helped me realize that, oh, there's all these, the mind goes through all these stories, but actually at core, like all is well. We're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. And that discipline of like not believing all my thoughts, not going into the story, that discipline of being like, oh, I can feel love in any and all circumstances. If my partner's off on a date, if I have a new beloved who's got someone else they're interested in, not me, like whatever the circumstances, there's a temptation to lose my shit, but there's also a temptation to find the deeper unconditional love, which is in the slow self-love, in the finding the stability of my nervous system, checking in, going, oh, what do I need? And how do I be the beloved in the practice of coming back into my wholeness? And it's a journey every time. And I'm not perfect at it by any stretch. And I'd also say I'm actually tend to be more prone to jealousy. There's a leaning that I have. I'd like to say less and less, but yeah, in thousands of people I've worked with, like if some people are really jealous and some people are, it doesn't come up often, I would put myself in this category. And so that makes me more opportunities to practice unconditional love. All right, so I will check in and see if there's any questions or any comments before we conclude our little live stream. And it was really fun for me to share these 5 just contemplations, really. Like I think about like what's been most damaging for me to have a healthy relationship with jealousy, and it's usually the story that jealousy and love don't belong together, or or that if just like everything, all the myths are kind of leading us off course. And jealousy's it's a rich, beautiful emotional crisis, and it's ripe for us to kind of find the love through the storm. All right, so thank you for all the sweet and Trinity's question is for a poly group that can to make introductions. And like myself, Trinity's in San Diego, and we used to have a poly munch, we used to have poly potlucks, and during the pandemic, the gift is as we're not meeting regularly in person, we get to expand our global tribe by meeting online and in person. And so Leveled Up Love right now online is doing a lot of wonderful work. Transmissions. We're working towards having in-person gatherings too, but currently it's a great service to the globe. And then I'd say if you're really committed to those in-person poly places to practice, I would, I'd say right now, depending on, in San Diego, we have an International School of Temple Arts training, which isn't about poly. It's about the spiritual, sexual, shamanic experience. And there's a whole mystery school that celebrates love in all its forms. And so that celebrates monogamy as well as celibacy, as well as, of course, open relating. But it is a beautiful sex positive place to put our bodies together and to practice and to have, these explorations. And there's a temple culture there, which is that, it's not like it's not so much about sex parties and orgies as it is around the devotional worship, and that, our erotic current is our life force energy, and how to dedicate that to something bigger than just the relationship or just self-pleasure. It's like something bigger, which is that comes through It's a much deeper, spiritual and shamanic path. And it may be more than you bargained for, because there's a lot of people who are looking for polyamory, and there's a lot of people who are looking for the spirituality. And I like to play like where those things intersect. My polyamory is very much a spiritual practice, and that's not always the case for everyone. So I know a lot of tantrics who are not polyamorous, and vice versa. So great. So the Wild Indigo asked what about the school. It's called the International School of Temple Arts, and that's also ISTA. Go to ista.life. I'm a faculty member, and we do these trainings all around the world, and they're just, wonderful transmissions, much, much more than the relationship path. It's really more about activating the full sacred sexual self. Great. All right. I'm so honored to spend this little afternoon with some of you, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure, and I'm working on a blog post with these 5 myths, and this was sort of a rough draft, just like, hey, here's some of the things I'm thinking about, and I'll let you know when the blog post is complete. Okay, blessings. Oh, and by the way, if you're not already signed up, I'd love to stay in touch with you at KamalaDevi.com. I send out monthly newsletters, and that includes these videos. I'd love to, keep you posted on all kinds of wild, fun, playful invitations. All right, lots of love.